Today, we're going to be talking about the perfect 7 out of 10 games. These are, well, actually, I guess that's a perfect way to start this conversation. Nick, what would you define as a 7 out of 10 game? Because it's not necessarily just a game that gets a 7 out of 10. Not every 7 out of 10 game is a good 7 out of 10 game.
Right. I think, I've been thinking about this all day, trying to figure out how to tackle this.
The numbers,
I
Mason.
think
What do they mean?
a 7 out of 10, the quintessential 7 out of 10 game is a game that obviously doesn't hit all the right beats and isn't, it's not going to win the highest praises or the best marks, but there's just some quality about it that you can't let go of, right?
Yep.
I think there's plenty of 6s that I've played, 6s and below, where it's like I kind of, am blocking that out of my memory, right? But those 7s, whether it's, an interesting art direction, some sort of interesting concept or gameplay, something about it has to worm its way into your head.
I think part of that, as an addendum, I do agree with what you're saying. As an addendum, I think mostly 7 out of 10 games are almost like it's a communal thing. Like, I don't think you really have, like, there's certainly games you can say, oh, this is a 7 out of 10. But I think, like, usually, by and large, a lot of 7 out of 10 games are universally accepted as 7 out of 10 games. But you can just be like, oh, this is like the 7 out of 10 game that came at the right time, connected with me in the right way, right place, right time, whatever it is that makes it special. And those are the games that we're going to be talking. Jesus, keep flashbanging myself. Those are the games that we're going to be talking about. Those are the highlights that I think that kind of stick with us.
I think we should also clarify potentially that when we say 7 out of 10 games, at least for me personally, it is more of a vibe that it's a 7 out of 10, right?
Not IGN
like, these
7
are not
out of 10.
games that exactly. We're not saying like, all the outlets gave it a 7 out of 10 and those are the only ones that we're allowed to talk about, right? Like there are some games that I brought here that we're going to talk about that I would say are better than a 7 out of 10, some that are worse than a 7 out of 10.
And you know what? There's a 7 out of 10 game that I'm going to talk about that I reviewed for a Respawn Station, and I gave it higher than a 7 out of 10. It's just that, again, communally, it was a 7 out of 10 game. But again, we'll get to that. So, I think, well, actually, do you want to just get into talk about what are our favorite 7 out of 10s are, or do you want to ease into it a little bit?
Let's throw one out there, and then we can, see where the conversation takes us.
All right. I'll let you go first, Nick. Throw out one of your, in chat, feel free to, if you're watching live, feel free to throw in your favorite 7 out of 10 game in chat. Maybe we'll mention it.
Let's go with, I'll go with this because it can branch out a bit bigger.
Okay.
I'll go with No More Heroes 3.
A game I have not played, so you have to walk me through this one.
Sure. So No More Heroes is the, it is from Grasshopper Manufacture, who the creative lead there is Suda51, who is, famous, game
infamous,
developer
maybe, famous,
either or. And I think Suda and Grasshopper occupy a really interesting space in the industry where he is a developer and, their team there at Grasshopper, anytime they're putting something out, like, I'm interested, right?
Yeah.
Because I think the visual style, the tone, and, in some degrees, the gameplay are always really interesting, or at least something that, there's going to be something unique about it, right?
Right.
No More Heroes, to give the quickest explanation I can about it. All of those games are, you play as this guy named Travis Touchdown. He looks like Johnny Knoxville and has a lightsaber, and he is a weeb that is trying to get the #1 spot on the world assassination ranking, right? So it's just a very eclectic kind of series. It's very comedic. It's very over the top and violent, and it just has this crazy concept, right? And I played No More Heroes 3 specifically last year, I believe, or the year before, and it's It's great fun. It's stylistically it blends so many different things. So like primarily it's like an action game, but there's also like some pseudo open world driving. There's like collectible finding. There is these text adventure kind of sequences that will happen throughout the story. Um, the gameplay, it's first and foremost an action game, like I said, so that's kind of the most fun, but it is like kind of basic. Like it's not like a Devil May Cry or a Hi-Fi Rush where you're memorizing these combos. It's kind of like you have your like 3 or 4 hit combo and that's what you're using in the combat, right?
Right.
Um the open world stuff, like there is driving and exploring, but a lot of the environments are like really flat and like kind of lifeless,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So there's these considerations that are made in the budget and like, you know, the scale of the project, right?
Hmm.
But you watch some of the stuff that happens in this game and you like, at least for me, like I'm just like sitting there in shock and I'm just like that's, you know, I've never seen a game do anything like this, right?
Yeah.
Um there is a clip from No More Heroes 3. Again, this is going to be kind of scattershot, I think.
Sure. Sure.
We'll see how we structure these, but there's a clip that I have on my phone saved for when I bring up fighting games, which is interesting because we were talking about that earlier. And
Mhm.
it was a tweet that I had made where I was playing the Street Fighter 6 beta like last year, and I was playing against a higher CPU, and basically the CPU was just grabbing me over and over again and throwing me onto the ground repeatedly. And there's a bit in No More Heroes 3 where Travis is fighting this boss that's like a cyborg ninja kind of guy.
Mhm.
And in the cutscene, he's starting to like lunge at Travis and he's like, I'm gonna get you. Your death is like at nigh. And then Travis grabs him and just pile drives him and like throws him on the ground. And then it cuts and he's just like, not today. And he just keeps doing it. And then eventually, after the 4th or 5th one, the ninja's just like, oh shit, getting thrown onto the ground. It's one of the funniest clips from a game that I've seen in a while. And it, if only for that alone, it would make me put it on this list here. But just in general, I mean, the games, they're goofy, they're eclectic, and you can kind of say this about all of Suda's games, right? Like, you know, we're going around with there's trailers for a remaster of Shadows of the Damned, which is also like a very kind of eclectic, like goofy horror game that's like a third person shooter. No More Heroes, you have these action games, you know, Killer is Dead and Killer 7, Lollipop Chainsaw. These
Yep.
games, they
Yep.
all have like limitations, but there's just something about them that I'm particularly really drawn to. Maybe it's just the over the top style and stuff that kind of, you know,
Yeah.
I kind of vibe with that stuff a bit more than, you know, more gritty or serious things or more realistic, like, you know, simulators, things like that. So
Yeah.
maybe it's just like a personal preference thing. But yeah, No More Heroes, like whenever I started looking at my game wall to see, you know, what I wanted to talk about, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely got to talk about Suda. Like,
Yeah. No. That's totally. That is a thing I've heard about the Suda, and I mean, again, it's one of those things. Like I think that I expected that series to die, and then it like suddenly came back to life, like stronger than ever. I was like really thrown off by it, but you know, honestly,
mhm.
good for that. Good for them because that's hard to do nowadays. Now, before I get into some of my picks, I will say I'll read some from chat. Minecraft, hot take. I think Minecraft is, I'd say like near 10 out of 10. I mean, that is a game that knows absolutely everything that it does. So I would say that's a 10 out of 10. By and large. But Dragon Age 2, I have heard that is a much more of a 7 out of 10 game. That's fair. Rayman 2 from the 90s. Whoa. I don't think have any 90s games 7 out of 10s on this list.
See,
But
I could see the argument for Minecraft,
Okay.
honestly. Like, I think, you know, I haven't personally played it in a while.
You
And
goddamn
obviously,
coward.
like, it set the world on fire and still does constantly. But, like, you know, think about, like, if you're going into Minecraft for a specific experience, right? Like, if you're a specific type of gamer, I guess I'll say,
Yeah.
you know, maybe the pixel art voxel graphics are kind of like, maybe that's not your cup of tea. The combat, kind of like what I was just describing with No More Heroes, like you have your bow and you have your sword and stuff, but like it's not the most deep kind of combat system in the world.
Yeah.
And then it's like where you get a lot of the depth is in the crafting recipes and all that, but I could definitely see an argument being made for it. It's definitely an unconventional one. I don't think many people would do that, but
sure, yeah. Okay, now some of mine. I purposefully didn't put my list on the shared doc because I wanted there's some controversial ones, and I didn't want I didn't want to have Nick be on his on the defense. All right, so the first one, the one that I was kind of teasing out earlier, Sleeping Dogs. I think it is very much so, especially when it came out, an absolute 7 out of 10, just the way it was received. I think the general consensus was a 7 out of 10 game. However, I'm not going to say what I gave it over on RespawnStation.com. You can check it out for yourself. But it is higher than a 7 out of 10, and I absolutely love the game. It's just that I think it clicked at the right time. I was looking for an open world game that, I really expected like a GTA type of thing. I wanted something like, Saints Row, but not as like, dick and ball jokes, and Sleeping Dogs was it
definitely fills that crack. Yeah,
it does. And it's like, so it has these segments of like Tokyo that are like inspired but not really, like it's like kind of like stitched together. I believe it's Tokyo. Now I'm second guessing myself, but I
think it's Hong Kong.
Sure, I'm an idiot. Hong Kong. So but it's like fragments of the city, like it's not like one for one recreation. It's just like portions of the real life place that are kind of stitched together to form the in-game world.
It is Hong Kong.
Okay, there you go. Hong Kong. I'm not even I should have pulled up my old review. It'd probably be on there. But of course, I'm not going to do that because you need to check it out. And it has a really like a surprisingly crazy cast, including Emma Stone. Okay, Emma Stone. Okay, and it's honestly, it has this one moment. I don't have you played Sleeping Dogs, Nick?
I played it several years ago.
So there's a moment. So did you finish? Like, do you know the story?
Again, it's been so long that I don't remember the particulars. I was gonna say the one thing that got its hooks in me is the like death animations when you like use the environment.
Sure.
Like I remember there's some really wacky ones in Sleeping Dogs. Particularly, I remember one with like you like throw a guy on a swordfish or something like that. Yeah.
Well, so there's this really actually now that I'm blanking on some of the combat, but so. The thing that makes Sleeping Dogs combat is so freaking dope is that it has environmental kills. So it's not just like, you're not just going up to someone and beating them up. You can then, like, if there's like an AC near like you can like take their head and shove it in. Like you can take things that are like, in the environment and use them for combat. And it's so intuitive. It feels like you're in an action movie. There's also like really cool scripted kind of events, but there's one moment in the story particularly that like it's a wedding scene, I'll say, that's all I'll kind of say, that got me so good. Like I was like so invested. I was like, holy shit, this is what works for me. This game like pushed itself above that kind of like the regular 7 out of 10. But I think what's fundamentally, there is a lot of 7 out of 10 aspects to the game. I think budgetary restrictions kind of play a thing into it as well, and how the game was kind of tossed around for a while in a state of limbo, with it was going to be a different game of a different name, and then it wasn't. And then Treyarch, fun fact, originally came up with the idea of Sleeping Dogs, like that the original pitch for Sleeping Dogs came from Treyarch, and then Activision was like, no, you go back to Black Ops, and then they're like, okay, yes, and then they didn't make this game. So yeah, it's a whole trip, but the definitive edition of Sleeping Dogs, I absolutely recommend. It is, if you're in that mood for an open world game, and the one that you can actually focus on, not just like shits and giggles, not just driving around in GTA Online. It's awesome. And from the chat, Sleeping Dogs is amazing. Haven't played it in a minute, but I think 7 is fair. Yeah, 7 is fair. It's just that then, on top of that, everything else kind of really adds and kind of cemented it as one of my favorite 7 out of 10s for me.
Yeah, like I said, it's been a while since I played it, several years at this point, so I don't remember exactly if the game has a lot of the more modern open world things where it's like, a lot of the checklist kind of design. So I won't put like a stamp on it that it's saying that this game doesn't have it, but I will say I don't remember it having
Sure.
a lot of that stuff. So if you're looking for an open world game that's, maybe a bit more focused, something like a Mafia or something like that, I feel like Sleeping Dogs kind of scratched that
it's a kind of a middle
itch.
ground because you do have like you can buy apartments and kind of move in and buy cars and that kind of thing. Like you can actually feel yourself moving up in life through the narrative, but then I think ultimately like the character work is surprisingly compelling for me. And so by the end of it, I was kind of invested. There's rumors for so long about Sleeping Dogs 2, and I don't even know. I think that's one of the hardest things, by the way, about a 7 out of 10 game is that when you try to like make it a sequel, you're not going to succeed because even if it's a 7 out of 10 again, it's rarely going to meet the same like expectations or whatever. I think a lot of the initial 7 out of 10 stuff comes from like the surprise of being like, oh shit, this is just 7 out of 10, but like I'm really into this. You rarely get that. So I think a lot of times 7 out of 10 sequels get like 5, 6 out of 10. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like that happens, or
or
you get
9, or
situation.
they're just perfect.
There's that, or it's like I feel like what you'll see also is it will get a sequel, but like 15 years later.
Yeah,
like
sure. Yeah,
something like Rage and Rage 2. I feel like there's like a massive time difference between those games. Maybe I'm just remembering that wrong.
No, you are correct.
It's a lot shorter, but
no, Starfield. Sorry, the Jesus Christ, I'm blanking. It is like a long gap, and so much so that they lost, like Rage lost the thing that made like its DNA almost, because like the thing when you picture when I say Rage on the 360, the things that come to mind is like dirty like
desert,
gray, and John Goodman. Those are the only two things that come to mind to me. And the second one, it's vibrant and no John Goodman. So it's on every account. You've missed the target. You know what I mean? It's not the same. But no, yeah, Rage is definitely one of those. I could definitely see. Nick, I'm gonna go for the second game because I think we're gonna do a snake format. So then you'll go too. I said it accidentally, so I'm just gonna get it out, rip the Band-Aid. Nick, Starfield, I think is a 7 out of 10 game.
Sri, I was gonna tell you when you asked me what should we use for the thumbnail, I was like, I had a half of a thought where I was like, we could do Starfield. Like,
I think Starfield is. Look, I know there's improvements and changes and updates that they've made. I haven't played any of those, so for me, I'm just speaking on what it was at launch. Starfield was very much so a 7 out of 10 game with how certain things, like there wasn't maps like cities didn't have maps when it launched. Some kind of like quality of life stuff that could be improved, and then they're also like, actually, this is part of the Bethesda DNA. And look, I'm a Bethesda shill, so I totally understand it. But and I think it works for me. Like I enjoyed it, but it's still. I have to whenever I'm talking to someone about Starfield and they're like, yeah, it was good, but like also like this kind of sucked, and I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. I could totally see like how so I could see how certain aspects or elements of the game, including like some of the way the map traversal is or that kind of thing, can be underwhelming or a little bit disappointing. But that being said, those peaks that the game sometimes hits, where it's these interactions of going to places or seeing things that are like feel so uniquely like to part of my story, and there's parts of like the game that I've seen that like Nick had doubled my playtime and had not seen until like 60 hours in or whatever, and so that kind of thing that like feels like, okay, this is the narrative that I've built, and I'm huge into that, like getting into the headspace of the characters, especially recently. Whenever I play an RPG, I'm like, okay, I have to play like the character type of thing. And I think Starfield, look, one of my favorites of last year, but 7 out of 10, I think.
I'm gonna stake my BGS fan flag in this hill, and obviously, I think that honestly, and this is, I'm trying to put my bias aside here.
Yes, go for it.
I think still Bethesda games and Starfield in particular, I think are the most overhated games in the industry. Like
Yeah.
Yes, exactly what we're talking about. Like I very much enjoyed my time with Starfield. It was the exact game that I was expecting it to be and that everybody should have expected it to be.
Yep.
Like, people get, super run away with the expectations for these games for some reason. And then like we find ourselves in this situation here where it's like, 5,000 video essays months after the game's out where it's like, that game was bad, right? And it's like
an honest conversation about Starfield. It was kind of bad.
Right. Yeah. 8 hours later, right? Like they are some of the most overhated games.
Yeah.
I will say. At the same time, I completely agree with what you were talking about. Like, Starfield, for every good thing that I can say that I enjoyed about it, I equally have a bunch of things that I'm like, yeah, that was kind of dumb. Yeah, they probably shouldn't have done that. My beloved 76, right? Like,
yes. Yeah.
I am probably among me and my friend Declan that play 76 together, I am extremely critical and harsh on 76. I still play it a lot and like I like the game, right? But it's like there are several areas, if we want to circle back into Starfield and not take the 76 route here,
sure.
like I just think that I love the art direction of Starfield. I love the character, like the dialogue stuff that they did with it. A lot of people, don't love the locked in camera perspective and everything. And they've changed that with recent updates. But like, weirdly, like that's what I was looking for. It was like, I don't love how Skyrim handles the dialogue where it's like off to the side and like, not really portraited. Like there's a charm to that locked in Bethesda camera angle that like I wanted them to go with. So it's like, I see people all the time that are just like, yeah, it was so bad. Like that dialogue, that camera, it's just like, oh, it's so stupid, Oblivion ass looking dialogue camera. And it's like, but that's what I wanted. And it's like, I don't get it. So yeah,
well, I think this is more for you to speak on because I haven't played this game. I think part of this, as we were having this conversation, I thought of it. It wasn't part of my list. But do you think Outer Worlds is a 7 out of 10?
I could see a lot of the same arguments that people have with Starfield. Maybe not the same arguments, but yes, I could definitely see a lot of people say Outer Worlds is a 7. I would probably also be one of those people, honestly.
Hold on, let me look at my ID. Yeah, I am one of them.
Yeah, I very similar to Starfield. I really enjoyed Outer Worlds, and it seems like Outer Worlds was kind of like marketing wise, it was like kind of the perfect storm, right? You have Obsidian coming off of, well, not coming off of New Vegas, but like they weren't shy about saying the developers of Fallout New Vegas in all of the trailers, right?
Yeah.
And so
coming off of Grounded, okay, if we're being honest. Coming off Grounded.
You have Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky of, two of the main creators of the original games coming in with a new space RPG that has gameplay that's very familiar to people that played New Vegas and everything. And it's like, yeah, I liked a lot of that stuff. I love the dialogue. I liked the gameplay. I thought it was, a little jank, but again, I was kind of expecting that, kind of like New Vegas. And I think in the years since the Outer Worlds, it's kind of in a weird spot. Like I watched Tim Kaine. He has his own YouTube channel where he talks about stories and everything of his career. And he's talked about the Outer Worlds. And I think he said that Outer Worlds is his most successful game as far as like sales and players and everything. But like weirdly, the community, I feel like if you were to ask like, where's Outer Worlds on the heat meter, a lot of people would say it's like kind of like a 7 out of 10. Like it was good, but kind of forgettable experience. So
damn, yeah. Okay, so go hit me with one of your 7 out of 10s. I mean, I see them.
I'll hit you with a 7 out of 10 that I gave a 7 out of 10, Sri, and that's Payday 3.
Oh, okay. I could definitely. I mean, look, you can go read Nick's thoughts on it on respawnstation.com. But quick and
Payday
dirty.
3.
I mean,
yeah, so that review obviously is,
early.
reviewed in the launch window of that game,
on.
which was probably one of the worst launches of last year.
I've heard.
Colossal.
That's why I play the real Payday, Crime Boss, Rocket City.
Oh, trust me, it's a talking point in the community. But this is one of those interesting ones where it's like, it's a 7 out of 10, but it's a type of game and experience that I realistically can't really get anywhere else. And we talked about it the other week when you were playing Crime Boss again. And it's like, Crime Boss is very similar to Payday as far as gameplay goes, but the vibes are just so night and day different to me, where it's like Payday, like it is like, it's about the suits, it's about the sneaking around, it's about the Heat style action gunfights, it's about the loading up bags of cash or jewelry behind, censored glass that's bulletproof, right?
Right.
And it's this kind of vibe, the music plays into it, where it feels like it's just so unique to Payday, right? And I really like the heist genre, and a big part of why I like it is the Payday games. And it's like, even at the time when I was playing Payday 2, when that first came out, GTA 5 was relatively new, and like heists are a big component of that game. But it's like, even a GTA 5 heist and a Payday heist like are very different.
Yeah.
Aesthetically, gameplay wise,
Yeah, definitely.
The list goes on. So it's funny because it's like, I have a level 100 character in Payday 3. Like, I played a lot of that game.
Yep.
And I've installed it, and I'm, picking away at it bits and pieces here. They just released a new heist, and it's like, maybe I want to buy that and play that, right? So it's like, Payday 3, it has a lot of issues. It still has a lot of issues. They are fixing things, and they are adding new content, obviously. So there's things to like here. And I do think that the gameplay, the like shooting gameplay, is like good. Like, it's not bad. I would say Payday 2's shooting is bad. Like,
right.
It's using an engine that was designed for racing games, I think, originally, or something. Like, it's really
dang.
The diesel engine is really jank. Like, I'm gonna be honest. And so like, at least Payday 3 actually plays like a kind of modern shooter would. It's just like, there's a lot of work that I think needs done to make the game like really kind of reach the same heights that Payday 2 reached.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's one of those ones where it's just like, I fully realize people's, aggressions against it. And I myself also, I gave it a 7 out of 10 when I reviewed it. So it's just like, I think it's one of those perfect
I think this is,
example
before you go to your next title, but I think this is, again, a good point of comparison, because, for example, we're talking about our favorite 7 out of 10 games, right? That's the context. Nick reviewed Payday 3, gave it a 7 out of 10, but he also gave a 7 out of 10 to 12 minutes. Nick, would you say that is up here? Do you think I think, just knowing you, I don't think this is on the same place as Payday 3, just because it's a 7 out of 10. It's on the same, it's the same metric, but it doesn't hold the same amount of water.
That's interesting, because you know what? Maybe proving the point that I'm about to say, I honestly kind of forgot that I even played 12 minutes.
There it is.
You just brought that up.
There it is.
So it's funny. In the technical aspect of a 7 out of 10, yes, I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would put it in this list, because it has that more like 5 or 6 out of 10 energy, where it's like, I played it and it's like, I experienced that game, but
it slips your mind. If it doesn't leave a lasting impact, that's what a good 7 out of 10 does. It leaves an impact, sticks with you. So what's your next one?
If I had to say something, I'd say like the cast from 12 minutes.
Yeah,
like Willem Dafoe was in it, and I remember that. But
Willem Dafoe, James McAvoy, and Daisy Ridley, I think.
Yeah, that was it.
Oh, there you go.
Star-studded cast for that game.
Yep. All right, what's your next one?
I'll go with Tony Hawk's Project 8 for my next
Wow.
one.
Okay. All right. Hit me with it.
I am a Tony Hawk fan. I don't know how much I've said that on the podcast. I feel like I've
You've
mentioned
mentioned
at least
it
once or twice.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the Tony Hawk games, and I was looking at Tony Hawk games. They kind of go in different eras, right? There's the original era of 1 through 4, more or less, where like it was this new thing. It was gaining a lot of popularity. It was Activision, one of their biggest franchises. And it was exciting every entry.
Yep.
Then we get into the PS2 and Xbox GameCube era, where you have things like Underground 2. I mean, Pro Skater 3 and 4 were on that generation also, but the jump away from the numbers, I guess we'll say. So you have your Underground 2, American Wasteland, and that's kind of, I think, where a lot of people put the peak of the series, specifically Underground and Underground 2. And then you get into the 360 gen, and we get a game like Project 8 and Proving Ground. And this is when Tony Hawk realized that they had to change something up in the jump to HD visuals, and they started messing with mechanics and things like that. And Project 8 occupies this really kind of weird spot where it's a hilarious thing in historical context also, because do you know what the point of Project 8 is?
No, I don't.
So Project 8 is basically a in-universe parallel to MySpace, because MySpace allowed you to have I think it was top 8 people.
Wow.
I never used MySpace.
Okay.
That was a little bit before me.
Yeah.
But that is essentially what the Project 8 is that you're doing skate challenges to try to rank up and get on Tony Hawk's Project 8, his top 8.
I see.
And you get text messages on Motorola flip phones and stuff like that. So just vibe wise, it's a very interesting point in early to mid 2000s history.
Yeah.
But also the gameplay, it feels kind of like old Tony Hawk, but they're starting to change physics and things like that. So it also feels a bit different. The character models look kind of gross, honestly. They're humans, and you can tell they're humans, but just the way that either the mouths move or the skin looks, everybody looks like they got some diseases going on or something. And yeah, it's a game that I have memories of playing it and everything, and I wouldn't say it's a bad game. Any of the Tony Hawk developed games by Neversoft, I enjoy playing them, but it definitely is no Tony Hawk's Underground or Pro Skater 2 and 3, and it's definitely not the dumpster fires that were the Robomoto games. So,
oh boy. All right. I'll stick with the theme for the next two, both horror. The first is, and I'm going to do newer ones because I think as I was compiling this list, I realized that I kept leaning towards games that are from the PlayStation 3 era, even Sleeping Dogs. Even though I played the definitive edition, it's a PS3 game. It came out PS3 360. From chat, Austin says American Wasteland is one of his favorites. Whoa. And obviously for Austin,
just played that kind of recently. It's a great one. I like it.
I think if anything, this the thumbnail with Borderlands was the bait for Austin. So all right, the first one on my horror duo is Resident Evil 3 Remake. I think it is. I know it makes sense because look, it's so similar to Resident Evil 2, and Resident Evil 2 is fucking awesome. So Resident Evil 3, you'd think, would also be a home run. But I think that there's certain creative, as I punch my mic, there's certain creative liberties that it takes. There's certain kind of deviances here and there. And while the game fidelity-wise still looks awesome, it's this weird, almost DLC-like, it's 6 hours long or something like that. And while it can certainly be intense, it never, I think, reaches quite those peaks of Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil Village or 7 for me. And at the same time, it's not bad. It's still it's in this new generation of Capcom, it's one of their weaker titles, but man, Capcom at their weakest is still killing it compared to some, anyone else kind of working in the business right now. So yeah, Resident Evil 3 remake. The next one I think is a little bit controversial, and I probably wouldn't have said this before if you asked me a few months ago, but now that I'm replaying the game, I think I've kind of solidified it. It's Callisto Protocol. I know.
Yeah.
I know
that is a 7 out of 10.
Absolutely,
right
it is. I initially was like really brushed off the game, but then I started replaying it, and like from the start, brand new, fully locked in, and I listened to the podcast just to really get myself in the headspace for it too. And there are so many things that the game is a little weird or wrong with, but also I think that the combat is actually fun. Like I know people were like, "Oh, this combat is weird," like. And I was probably one of those people when the game first came out, and I didn't give it the time of day. Getting hands on it, it feels so awesome. I mean, it's like the way you dodge, it's like so satisfying. I don't know why. And it's one of those things where like I'll find myself in like surrounded by like 7 bad like alien mutated creatures, and I can still have a chance of making it out of it alive. So it loses some of the horror aspect of it that way, but man, it's still, I think that like the sound design is top notch. It's the visually, like again, it's on par with fidelity wise with like some of the Resident Evil games. And while it might not be like the Dead Space rebirth spiritual successor that people might have been hoping for, I think that it's still like, I mean, it still scratches a horror itch. There's definitely some spooks in there for sure.
Yeah, I still haven't played Callisto Protocol. I want to get to it, but like I think the gameplay is like that perfect, focus point that we're trying to find with each of these games, where it's like they definitely tried something new with that like more melee specific combat. I think everybody watching the trailers and everything was thinking this might just be Dead Space again, which is more of a shooter, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, you have all the visuals and the vibes and everything going for the game. I can't really speak to the writing or anything, but like the gameplay,
sure.
It's that one thing that they tried to take a leap with, and
yeah,
some people liked it, some people didn't.
Hey, did they need to get people to look at viscera and like black dark web fucking gore? I'm not sure, but
right,
what's there works for the most part.
The Resident Evil 3 thing I think is also interesting because I feel I wasn't there at the time, getting the discourse of the original Resident Evil 2 and 3, but from what I've heard from other people, it seems like the game almost went through the exact same criticisms when it originally came out, because it was it was a quick release after Resident Evil 2 using reused assets and everything, sort of similar to what it was with the remakes, and like Resident Evil 2 was just so leagues above what 3 accomplished, even like that. It would be very interesting to see. I feel like it would be the same discussion whether it was the originals or the remakes.
Yeah, I didn't actually think of it that way, but that's fair. All right, Nick, what's your next 2?
Do you want the shooter or do you want the open world game? Let's go with that.
Let's do shooter first.
Shooter, I put Call of Juarez Gunslinger.
100% agree. 100% agree. This is it fits the bill. I mean, look, it's one of those games. It's like poster child for this genre.
A 7 out of 10. Right? Yeah. It's still the only Call of Juarez that I've played. I think most of the others. I think I might maybe missing one of them, but this one stylistically is like, it's more of a cell shaded thing rather than it going for more like realistic visuals, and I think it elevates the gameplay that much more. It's a bit more arcadey. It's a bit more like basically like when you're shooting desperados and cowboys and stuff, you're getting like giant like point multipliers and stuff flashing on the screen. So it's very overtly arcadey. It's a bit faster paced, but I think there's some representation things that are a bit problematic about the game in some of the other games.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a healthy layer of jank in the game. There's definitely some
expected
some lower budget going on in the gameplay department, and some people would say like The visuals might be playing into the lower budget as well. Like they went with a more stylistic approach because it might have been easier. I know certainly the cutscenes, they're like, kind of storybook-esque. So like we've mentioned with some of the other ones, there's definitely some budgetary things going on with this game. But when I did play it, like it was pretty fun. And, if I'm looking for like something quick Western themed that I can get into and like I don't have to install 100 gigs for Red Dead 2, like Call of War as Gunslinger might be one that I would pop back into again.
Real quick from chat, has LA Noire been brought up yet? Definitely deserves to be here. No, I have not played.
We have not brought it up.
I have not played LA Noire. I do own a copy. I own it on the machine that Rockstar intended for it to be played, the Nintendo Switch. So I've not yet played it. Yeah, I've not yet played it, but I do own a copy of LA Noire.
I played the 360 version and I played the remastered version that they put out. And
okay. Is it?
I would agree. Okay. It's definitely.
Oh, I think Oh, sorry. Not to cut you off.
I was just gonna say that like it's a good game, but like I could definitely see a lot of arguments for it being a 7 out of 10. Like,
yeah,
it's definitely not like GTA or Red Dead.
Is that it's like. A lot of times, 7 out of 10 games, another thing we can add on to it, and if we haven't already kind of hammered it in already, or colored it in, whatever you want to say, is they often have some original quirk or idea that, like, the whole game hinges on it. You know what I mean? And for LA Noire, it's that facial, like, animation. It's, like, never done before in the industry. So, there's always... You could probably go back to a lot of these games and find... something that's like for Sleeping Dogs, it's like that the combat being like dynamic in terms of like environmental action. I'm trying to think of what else. Starfield is the entire thing. Starfield. That's just so there's these kind of like ambitious reaches that the games make, I'll say. But go ahead. What's your
LA Noire? LA Noire, real quick, I want to say it's kind of a game that's like the gift that keeps on giving, though, also. Because like at the time, the facial, capture stuff is like really impressive. And to a certain degree, it still is. But like we still get, clips being posted every once in a while of like that one old guy that's like clearly lying. And he's just like, ooh,
like, I wonder.
Like, like you start to see the areas where like it's very overt, and like some of the responses that Cole can give for like certain things is like that game is just a gem that definitely keeps delivering even all these years later. My last one is the Saboteur.
Another one I agree with. And you know what? Here's a fun fact for you guys. Old Nick over here used to have review games on his own before we brought him on, and I remember watching his review for Saboteur and being like, "This son of a bitch! I gotta work with him." And you know what? Here we are. But anyway, that's how I found out about Saboteur. There you go.
Saboteur is a open world game set in World War II.
Yeah.
And it's developed by Pandemic Studios, who developed the Star Wars Battlefront games, the originals, also Destroy All Humans that we talked about recently.
Yeah.
Games like Full Spectrum Warrior and some other stuff too. Like they occupied a very similar space that I would say that Neversoft did with Activision, kind of like AA kind of interesting things. And Saboteur was interesting because part of the game, it's an open world game. It's you're driving around kind of like GTA and stuff. But it's like black and white until you like liberate certain areas, if I remember right, and it reintroduces color back, or it's like, I think you actually have to like liberate areas.
And then it gets color.
The city, and it gets the color back. So there's this interesting color swap mechanic, but like, we've kind of touched on it on a bunch of the other games. Like there's a little bit of jank in the gameplay. It's not quite as tight as you want in the shooting. The driving's not quite as, responsive as you want. The writing, I remember being like a sore spot for me. I remember it being like not very good at all. So, that's, neither here nor there, but it's like how many other open world,
World
War II games
stylized too?
Not really any.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, You've flown through your list. I have a few stragglers, but here's a last kind of topic I'll mention. That maybe is a little kind of side note to this whole conversation. And I don't really know if we have the time to unpack this whole thing, because I think this will give us introduce a whole new subgenre of games that we could talk about. So we're not going to go deep dive into it. But sure. Eurojank games live in that 7 out of 10, maybe 6 out of 10, like in that range. But I think that if there's a community that has embraced the 7 out of 10s, like accepting that a game is not perfect, understanding even before you go into a game that there are shortcomings, but just being like, I'm here to love you anyway. You know what I mean? That's Eurojank. That's the games that like Piranha Bytes and company make with the likes of Gothic or Elix or anything like that. So, like I said, we don't have time to really delve into it, but I think that genre. I mean, Biomutant. That's one Nick has played in the past. That lives in that area. And again, it really depends on like if it comes at the right time, if you can accept it. Some people can't. Some people will play Eurojank game and be like, "What this is trash." I could totally understand it, but at the same time, there's some people who like live and die by like they won't pick up a GTA 5, but they'll be there day one for one of these kind of games. You know what I mean? So. Interesting one to throw in there. Little side topic. But with that said, I have a few games to run through, and I'm not going to spend too much time on them just because we've talked about some of these quite a bit. So let's do 2 games. I'll pair them up. There's 2 games that I think 7 out of 10s that are console exclusives to their own. And look, I got no. Home, I mean, that sounds fucking bad. I got no alliances, okay? So I have one PlayStation and one Xbox. So Xbox. Sorry, I'll start with actually Nick. Which one do you want, PlayStation or Xbox?
Let's do Xbox.
Okay, Xbox. Xbox One launch title: Rise, Son of Rome.
Oh baby,
I played that recently. I didn't play it when it first came out, but like 2 years ago, I went back and played it, and I was like, wow, this hits this mark. I mean, it's super for that game. If you were talking about like the thing that is like, oh, what are they trying to do? It's the visual fidelity. It's like they're really trying to sell you on the fact that this Xbox One can put out a lot of power. And 2, it's this really interesting combat where it's like minimal UI and like the attacks and everything are pretty much like color coded to the Xbox buttons, so you kind of know that way how to react. Really interesting. Wasn't a huge fan of the story, but like it really was like this. It had this momentum of being. It was also a short game, 8 hours, I think, but it had this momentum that you're like, you got to kind of get swept away with it and kind of get lost in it. And speaking of getting lost in it, there's a PlayStation game. Nick, can you guess what this is? It's very similar to Rise, Son of Rome, so that's why there's a chance you might be able to guess.
It's one that I think I considered putting on here also. Order 1886.
Hell yeah, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
The Order 1886. Again, it's I don't want to say shtick in a bad way, but like what it's trying to do is this like super cinematic black bars on top and bottom, like it's one of my high school or college films, but it has werewolves. It has this really cool lore that they develop. I will say werewolves is a plus point for me, so that's automatically on the list. But yeah, just like the way that this game develops its world and sets the stage is so interesting that I'm honestly a little bit disappointed, if anything, that we haven't seen anything else from it. But I also think that I don't think the game did that well. So I don't think it'd be foolish to expect there to be something else, especially when like. There's series in the PlayStation library that have done well and have not received a sequel, so you can't hope for all of them to have sequels. But again, we talked about it before. Go ahead.
Order 1886 is interesting for me because like the visuals, I played it a couple years back, and the visuals I would argue are still better than some games that come out today. And it's like that was a really long time ago. Like I'm not sure if that was exactly launch window or not, but
close to,
it was.
But
early
yeah, I mean,
in
Santa Monica was working on. Right, that was Santa Monica, I believe. They were.
It's Ready at Dawn.
Ready at Dawn. Sorry, yes, not yes. And Santa Monica, but still Ready at Dawn. they were working. I mean, the visual fidelity of that game is so impressive. Playing through it, it's yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say was that Sri, I've been critical of Sony's modern game design.
How dare you?
With the the over the shoulder third person with a companion kind of gameplay that a lot of the games do. Weirdly enough, Order 1886, if we ever got a sequel, that is one game that I would actually like that gameplay, I feel, to be applied to.
Sure.
Like,
right.
I feel like that world and that lore that they built up and everything would be much better fit to a game of that style than just like a Gears of War corridor.
I think Ready at Dawn is now making like VR games, so if anything, we're going to see a VR sequel to the Order 1886. I mean, I'm ready for it.
They're owned by like Meta, I think.
Oh, so, really? That makes sense. That makes sense. They are. Last I know, I remember them being very. I don't know why I said Santa Monica, but yeah, I remember them being very into VR.
The chances of it are small, but yeah, it is something that I would like to see in the future. Right. I think.
So last two games again. I'm gonna mention them quickly because we don't have all day. Need for Speed 2015. I mean, look, that chuckle. No, Nick agrees. The thing that it tries to do differently, I would say the live action cutscenes it's shtick. And I will say it's a shtick for sure in Need for Speed because it's so weird. It has like a cast. Like I remember last year, or maybe the year before that, I was watching the show Andor, the Star Wars show, and one of the actresses from Need for Speed is in it. I was watching. I was like, why does this lady look so familiar to me? And I looked her up on IMDb, and I was like, Need for Speed, of course, that's what she's from. But yeah, it's goes for these weird cutscene ideas that is just full of just like chugging Monster Energy drinks and fist bumping a whole bunch of people. Like everyone you see here is fucking fist bumping them. But it's still super fun. I mean, it's Need for Speed. It's like it has that core Need for Speed gameplay. So you could easily kind of just spend a lot of time with it. And I believe I got the platinum for it too. So it's definitely one of those. I think 7 out of 10 games you can also grind. I think I think some of these open world games, especially that get to 7 out of 10, I think you can grind a little bit. And I say that as a segue to my last 7 out of 10, and this is one of my personal favorites for a long time. It's Prototype 2. I went back to the PS3. It's one of those. I actually have this like cool freaking sleeved cover edition of the game too. Prototype 2, I haven't actually played Prototype 1. I've heard a lot of people recommend that I go back to play it, but Prototype 2 is so, again, it's similar to the idea of Sleeping Dogs in terms of this open world game, but it's much more, not Saints Row either. It's not open world in terms of like you feel like you're in a living world. It's open world and it's like almost like Spider-Man. You're not going into buildings or anything like that. It's closer to Spider-Man. It's like a superhero open world game. But it's you can grind in it. I think that the kind of the not symbiote, but whatever it is like that your character is kind of possessed with, that gameplay mechanic is what Prototype 2 kind of does differently. It's like it's the main attraction. It takes itself a little bit too seriously at times, but I think that's part of the charm of it as well. So yeah, Prototype 2, last game that I wanted to mention. There's I mean, I kept it to games that I played that I can kind of speak to, but like, I mean, there's like Mad Max, for example, that again, also from 2015, I think also another very fitting 7 out of 10 game, but